if you ever had a goal or a dream, personal or professional, that was so big, so gnarly, so complex, the idea of actually pursuing that dream, you're like, no way. Maybe you have an idea that would completely revolutionize property and casualty insurance, but you're thinking, I don't want to be the gal that rocks the boat. You know, I don't want to be the guy that goes against the status quo, and so you keep that idea inside. You know, I think we've all had moments in our lives like that. And one of the questions I get asked is, Nicole, how did you become an Air Force Thunderbird pilot? And the fact of the matter is that I had a dream as a young kid to grow up and do that someday. A little bit of context about me. I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. Yeah, people are from Las Vegas, Nevada. You didn't know that, right? Yeah, obviously I tell people way too short to be a showgirl. I went with plan B and become a fighter pilot, okay? But what's fun about being a kid in Las Vegas, Nevada is there's an Air Force base there called Nellis Air Force Base. Its nickname is home of the fighter pilot. I used to watch fighter jets fly overhead every day, and I would just get so excited thinking, I want to do that someday. It's also home to the United States Air Force Thunderbirds. I remember being in high school, taking my brown bag lunch out onto the football field, eating my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and screaming overhead would come this 6-jet formation of red, white, and blue jets, you know, with the smoke trails behind them, and I would shake with excitement. You know how like kids do, just shake with excitement, and I would think there's people up there. I want to be one of those people. But I knew that it was hard. It's hard enough to become a fighter pilot. It's even harder to become a Thunderbird pilot. For a little bit more context, in the active duty American Air Force today, there's about 12,000 pilots. Of those, 2,000 are fighter pilots, and of those 6, only 6 have the opportunity on any given year to be a Thunderbird. I mean, it's statistically improbable that anybody becomes a Thunderbird pilot, but obviously it's not impossible. But the idea of me actively pursuing that childhood dream? No way. Too big, too gnarly, too complex. Every time I would think about it, the voice in my head would say, other people become Thunderbird pilots, Nicole, not you. And so I kept that dream inside. And I went about becoming a fighter pilot, you know, flying that beautiful F-15E Strike Eagle that I showed you earlier, going about my career in the Air Force. And every year, the Air Force Thunderbirds, the Air Force, sends out an email to all of its fighter pilots at the exact same time every year that says the exact same thing, ding into the inbox. We're looking for 3 new Thunderbird pilots. It's a 2-year assignment, so 3 pilots are on their first year, 3 pilots are experienced on their second year. Ding into the inbox, we're looking for 3 new Thunderbird pilots, here's the qualifications, here's the application, and even though it was my dream, and even though I was qualified, every year, when that email would come into the inbox, ding, I would do the exact same thing. Delete. Delete, delete, delete. Other people become Thunderbird pilots, Nicole, not you. And so year after year after year, I kept that dream inside until 2005. I found myself getting ready to deploy for Operation Iraqi Freedom into combat again. And I had found myself at a place where I had every single certification and qualification you could have as a frontline fighter pilot. I was an instructor pilot, an evaluator pilot, a mission commander. I had led my peers in and out of combat already. And ding into the inbox comes that same email. And for whatever reason in 2005, when I read that email, it was like a light bulb went off in my heart and in my mind. And as I read those words, I thought to myself, why not me? Why not me? And I remember I went to bed and I tossed and I turned and I tossed and I turned. And the very next day, I came into work, and with all the courage I could muster, with a knot in my stomach, the voice in my head saying, don't do it, I walked into work with all the courage I could muster. I looked around and I spoke that childhood dream out loud. I told my peers, my supervisors, my colleagues, my chain of command, I'm applying to be a Thunderbird. Man, that was hard to do. Super hard to do. But what surprised me, generally speaking, people were tickled. People initially were very supportive. But as the days went by and they had time to think about it, if I had $1 for every time I heard this, you know, Nicole, it's hard to be a Thunderbird. Yeah. You know, Nicole, you probably won't get picked. Yeah. You know, Nicole, they've never had a woman Thunderbird pilot before. Are you sure you want to do that? And over and over and over, I heard those same 3 things, and that voice of self-doubt started to grow. But I thought to myself, no, Nicole, stay focused, put that application together. A big, gnarly application, as you might imagine, for a job like this, right? A picture of me in uniform, a letter of why I wanted to be a Thunderbird, all of my career-long annual HR or personnel reports, all of my annual career-long check ride or flying test scores. But the single most important thing, the thing that was weighted the most in this application, was a letter of recommendation from the first full bird colonel in your chain of command. Now, I am a young 30-year-old captain in this picture. At that time, a full bird colonel, that was a big deal. A full bird colonel, that was intimidating, right? I'm now a retired full bird colonel, I can assure you. We're not a big deal, we're a dime a dozen, okay? But at the time, I thought it was a big deal. So I get this bright idea. I'll just draft the letter of recommendation for him. All I have to do is take it in and get his signature, as John Hancock, as Americans like to say. So I put this whole application together, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. With all the courage I could muster, the knot in my stomach, the voice in my head saying, don't do it, I grabbed my application and I walked over to the colonel's staff, and I slid that application across the desk and said, I'm applying to be a Thunderbird. And I'll never forget this. The guy looked right at me and said, you know, Nicole, it's hard to be a Thunderbird. You know, Nicole, you probably won't get picked. You know, Nicole, they have never had a woman Thunderbird pilot before. And the colonel only has one recommendation he's allowed to give. So we're not sure we want to waste it. Boom, right? Yeah, it's hard for you to listen to that story. You can imagine how I felt in that moment. Let's pause for a second. I know this person. They weren't trying to be mean. Right? What was coming out was the unconscious bias that every single one of us needs to check ourselves on every day. What was coming out was the cultural paradigms of the Air Force at that time. And what was coming out was other people's expectations about what I should or should not be doing. And in that moment, here's what happened. I looked right at him, grabbed my application, and I removed it. I looked him in the eye and said, you're right. I am so sorry for having bothered you. And I walked out feeling embarrassed and ashamed. Other people become Thunderbird pilots, Nicole, not you. I almost never became a Thunderbird pilot at all. And in that moment of dejection, I did what any self-respecting fighter pilot would do. I went across the street to the officers' club and I grabbed a beer, right? So I'm over there thinking, thank goodness I didn't put myself out there. Thank goodness I didn't risk failure. Who were you, Nicole, to think you could be a Thunderbird? Started drinking my beer, talking to the guys about the days flying, talking with our hands like fighter pilots do. And as I'm having these conversations, this door over here opens up and in walks the wing commander. Now, the wing commander is a brigadier general. This guy is 6'5", the man's man. The poster child of the macho male fighter pilot. He walks over and for whatever reason starts making small talk with me. To this day, I have no idea why he was talking to me. I don't know if it was like, CEO, walk amongst the people today, check. Like, I don't know what he was doing. I don't even recall what we were talking about, but I'm trying to hold my own, drinking my beer, talking to him. And in that moment, over walks my immediate supervisor, a guy by the name of Dan Debris, call sign Trash. Trash Debris. Okay, now the rest of you get the call sign. That's where call signs come from. So Trash Debris, he comes over, he says, General, did you know Nicole's applying to be a Thunderbird? I'm like, ixnay on the Underbird thay, right? This is mortifying. Neither of these guys know that I had decided to remove my application. And in that moment, the general looks down at me, way down at me, and goes, that's great, Nicole, how's your application going? I'm terrified. I take a swig of my beer, I look up at him, and true story, I say, you know, sir, it's hard to be a Thunderbird. You know, sir, I probably won't get picked. You know, sir, they haven't had a woman before, so I don't want to waste anybody's time. It's embarrassing to admit this, but it's the truth. Everything everyone else had said around me had taken up room in my own head and when it now was coming out of my own mouth. And in that moment, Brigadier General Mark Matthews gave me one of the single greatest gifts of my professional career at that time. And it's something I want you to remember. The next time that voice in your head says that dream is too big for you, that idea is too innovative, don't rock the boat, I want you to remember this, okay? He looked down at me and he squeezed my shoulder, a little bit hard, I think, to get me to shut up because I was just like, excuse. He squeezed my shoulder, he looked at me and he said, Nicole, nobody wants to lead a scripted life. Nobody wants to lead a scripted life. And he walked away and left me in the most awkward silence ever. But with those words, he lifted the weight of the world off my shoulders. He told me it was okay to dream big, it was okay to rock the boat, that it was okay to risk failure in pursuit of personal and professional growth. And it's not so much he was telling you and me to write ourselves into the script. Hear what he was saying. Don't ever write yourself out of the script. And as leaders and teammates and colleagues in this industry, don't ever write anybody else or their wild ideas out of the script either. I think it's a firm reminder of the power of our words to make or break somebody else's dream or idea. It's a firm reminder of the power of being a role model and mentoring, and I think it's a deep reminder of this idea of talent management. Where are you looking for talent and ideas when you build your teams? Because I guarantee you, nobody saw me coming.